Welcome back to the Reboot Show. I'm your host, Sally A. Illingworth, and I'm excited to be here today for our fifth segment of the Daily Download series, which is powered by Big Mouth. Joining me today is our resident technology panelist, Luke Stowe, and Kelly Hutchinson from Digital Innovation Futures. Before we get started, I'd like to hand over to Luke to do our acknowledgement of country.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. On behalf of all of us appearing live today from Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, we would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations as the traditional owners of the land in which we all meet today. We respectfully recognise elders past, present and emerging.
Thanks, Luke. As always, if you're coming in live, drop a 1 below. And if you're coming in on the replay, drop a 2 below. And as always, let us know where you're coming in from. It's incredible to see how these platforms bring us all together. So, as always, with the DIF Daily Download series, Kelly, can you kick us off? What are the highlights from the festival today?
Well, it was the final day of the Emerging Innovation Summit, and I got up a bit early and I presented first thing in the morning and looked at how gameplay can help us actually imagine the future that we want. So really looking at, we know that we want to have a future that's inclusive, or that we want to make sure that economic development is equally distributed. We know we've got the Sustainable Development Goals. How can technology help us achieve that? So there's some of the topics that actually have been discussed at the Emerging Innovation Summit. So it was really great. And actually it was interesting. We just did the acknowledgement of country. We had I'm just looking at my list here, but we had a speaker from Canada who also gave Professor Barry Sanders, and he also gave acknowledgement to their Indigenous peoples, and that was really special. And there was that nice connection between Australia and Canada as two countries that are trying to reconcile with their Indigenous populations. And actually, he's like the distinguished professor, chief scientist of the Creative Destruction Lab in Canada.
What's that? That sounds dangerous.
Yeah, so, it really is that thing around. He was talking about quantum computing and big data. And it was fascinating. So it's quite a big topic, and it is actually something we do not know how it works, right? And he really was good at being able to simplify very complex, advances in technology. And it was just really interesting. And actually, I've got a couple of the slides, and I will post them up. But it was just a really good way of having something so complex that we don't know what the edge of this knowledge is yet, right? And that's really exciting about what that break line that we've got moving forward. So, yeah, and there was a nice connection in actually with, we've got the Piercy oration tomorrow night, and I know I've talked about this a few times, but Trevor Piercy led the team that built CIRAC, the world's fourth computer. Now, there's a new quantum computer in Australia named after him as well.
Oh,
so
wow.
It was a really nice connection to look at a computer that was built in the 40s, and he went to the head of what it was, CSIRO at the time, and said, "Look, I need budget to build a machine. It's probably about half the size of this room. I don't know what it's going to do, and I'm not quite sure in the end how much it's going to cost. But believe me, it will be worth it."
I'm sure the business people got excited by that.
Well, what was fascinating is it's exactly the same discussion now that CSIRO's scientists are having about, here we are, we don't exactly know what this technology is going to do, but we have to invest in it because that's where we need to go next. So it really is that whole thing of faith, and there's a real bit of that entrepreneurial spirit and that real disruption of saying, look, we don't know where technology is going to take us. And there was another one of the speakers, Simon Kaplan, was talking about, no, it wasn't Simon, it was another speaker, but talking about how scientific knowledge is created, and that it was the scientific revolutions 500 years ago that looked at, Copernicus and the way that the solar system worked, all the way through this process of how you test out something, how you try something, how knowledge is created and built on top of each other's advances, and that sometimes something that feels so far out there on the edge then becomes the norm. And that's really been really, really interesting themes across a lot of the speakers across the Emerging Innovation Summit.
Yeah, and I like the way you talked about gamification of innovation. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned it yesterday, but the Cards for the Future is really part of this future scenario building, and that sometimes we need to engage different parts of our brain because otherwise we're too rigid. And so things like different models and like design thinking about taking a problem and looking at it differently, appreciative inquiry might look to the future that you want to imagine. How would we get there based on the success of the past? All of these types of things, hackathons, all of these different ways that we can go about problem solving and imagining a future, and games is one way about going about it. And that's the thing about a hackathon. And we just had the 48-hour hackathon for the Study Melbourne group with Hacker Exchange on the weekend. And that's, again, team building process, problem solving, working together, and then doing a pitch at the end and see who wins. If that's not a game, I don't know what is. And, you know, that's the process, you know. So that creative tensions, that time-based limit, that was actually something that came out today, was about sometimes the constraints you're working in lead to amazing innovations. Yep. So I
love working under pressure. I think there's nothing better.
I agree. Being the 13th hour woman, as I've been nicknamed in the past. But sometimes that pressure is what creates that. But it's also, we're living in a world that's gone through massive amounts of constraints. And there was a really interesting talk around tech-driven innovation, COVID-driven tech and business innovations about e-commerce, and saying that e-commerce, you know, had quite a long time ago history of establishments who gave, again, this lovely trajectory of what was early innovations around selling through fax or selling through phone, you know, moving that same principle all the way through to now being able to, basically, we need e-commerce. That's how we've managed to survive, of being able to groceries or, you know, services being able to be delivered to us through lockdown, you know, and that's been, you know, the adoption of that has taken a bit of time, but now it's really a technological advance that has really found its place.
And Kelly, I also saw today, caught a bit of it actually, which was around who dropped the ball and why it's important, and learning lessons from the past.
Well, you know, that one's a bit of a tricky one because, you know, it was going to happen and then it got cancelled at the last minute because people couldn't manage the balls in the air, which was that they realised that with the homeschooling and, you know, trying to run a startup and be an entrepreneur, and the story was going to be around sharing their stories, and literally at the last minute, they pulled it and they cancelled it to move it to later in the year. And it was an important thing to do because that actually just really illustrates that we're living in such uncertain times, and it doesn't matter that you say something's going to happen, you've got people lined up to come, and then it's about to happen. And I tweeted it on social media, and then I went, oops, I got the email saying, no, we've moved it, because that's actually how fast we have to move. And one of their speakers said, you know what, I can't do it. I know I'm meant to be talking about keeping all the balls in the air and juggling it all, but guess what? Saying no sometimes is really, you know, part of that entrepreneurial resilience building that we talk about. And that's some of the stories from our entrepreneurial community and our startups. And actually that program is fantastic. And we do have a number of their other, you might have been looking at their on-demand sessions, because they've been doing a lot about this. How do entrepreneurs manage to balance life? But also it's all about trying to get people who may be in corporate to think, maybe I'd like to try a career change and go into a startup for a couple of years. We talked about the other day that you might want to take time out from your corporate career and go and work in a not-for-profit. Yeah. And again, they're different places that will really help you do that. Hey, Claudine.
Yeah, we've got a couple of people jumping on live, you know, and I think it's an interesting point of discussion, because I think, you know, thinking about, say, people in corporate who perhaps want to, you know, dip their toe in the sort of more entrepreneurial space throughout the COVID period, it's probably safe to say that most people have been forced to have to do that, you know, because we've all had to become more flexible, more agile, be more open to new ideas and new ways of doing things. Yeah. And I'm really fascinated by the quantum computing conversation that was had today, and just if I can pick up on that note, because one to your point, which is something you really highlighted, is that is such an unknown space. And I think that's one of the things that excites me about technology is it's mostly always unknown, right? What are the possibilities? What can we do with this? I'm mindful that many governments, I think, are potentially a little bit nervous about quantum computing because of, perhaps what it can offer, particularly to, some bad guys and all that sort of stuff. But it's certainly an exciting space.
Well, I've looked up my screenshot from today, and it was around classical computing. Hello from Hawaii and the Netherlands. Classical computing is around information. It's numerical representation. Typically, we know 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1. And the processing is around Boolean logic, e.g. and, or, not, or, nor, right? So we get that. That's pretty much the basics. But quantum computing is information is a wave represented by the zeros, but also can superimpose with another wave of the 1, 1, 0, 0, right? And like a 2-note chord in music. And the processing is that quantum logic, the detection measures bit strings or hears tones, not chords. Now, just as my brain in a bit, but it's a really interesting, I thought, okay, I can see that how that's the information being processed, And he talked about Schrodinger's cat paradox the different way that knowledge and these things are created. So I didn't quite get that either. But it was an interesting, one of the quantum computers is called Xanadu, just reminds me of,
That's an interesting name.
Yeah. And as I said, there's a PSE quantum computer being developed in Australia. So, so it's very interesting about what the different, and there's actually a little book. I will put, I'll put the link with you guys as well on sort of how this sort of has evolved and works and stuff. But yeah, and again, this is the thing about DIF is that I don't know anything about quantum computing, and I work in technology, but I know about that, the hunch, the belief, and the following the trail. And that's been another interesting thing around this. The program is people talking about, as researchers, you can get deeper. You just dig a bigger hole, deeper hole. Yeah. You get smaller and smaller and more focused and focused and focused. But it's this ability to sort of step out and have a look broadly and take in new information that then shifts you maybe. And that's that point of going, and that's what innovation is. It is very rare that you get innovation as new to the world solutions. But what you're getting is a new perspective, a solution to an old problem that might have been a community development problem, but once you put a commercial, a business lens on it, came up with a different solution. So that's where you've got the bottom of the pyramid, right, for business innovation, whereby in the emerging markets, seeing that people who can spend $1 a day, but they're still a customer, and while I might get paid monthly, they get paid day on the work. I might buy a 1 litre bottle of shampoo. Unilever said, well, they still have a consumer power and they will make a sachet as a single serve. And so that shift in thinking, is where new markets are created. That's innovation of really thinking through those different business models, which are just as important as thinking around what the technology is, because if you don't make money out of it or fund it, if it doesn't meet a customer's need that they're prepared to pay for it, then that's not commercializable. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's no commerciality.
I love the fact that the DIF is available on demand, and just before, we probably have some new audience members today listening in. So how can people register and get DIF on demand?
So basically it's diff.vic.gov.au. So it's an initiative of the Victorian government where we want to basically bring together amazing stories and examples of Victorian companies and innovators and entrepreneurs and researchers to share their experiences and their insights. So we've had presentations, we have some workshops, you've got a whole day conference maybe, and all of those parts have been recorded because it's all online. And then it means if you're not live and able to tune in throughout the days of it's been on, you can go along and have a look and just catch up. And basically going on the DIF online event hub, if you create a user account, you can then like everything. And then you've got a short list and you can come back to it when you're ready and just push play. And so you can see we had the cyber debate last week, the opening. And it was really, really interesting about, which is worth, technology or people when it comes to cybersecurity risk. So that's live now. But also there's some on-demand seminars that have been all around cybersecurity in business and where the community needs are maybe around this area. And they were from the ASA conference over the past 6 months ago. But you would have gone to the conference to see it. So we partnered with them to say, hey, share those great case studies so that people who'd never heard of the Australian Information Securities Association, which is the information security professionals that are keeping us safe across the country, that they've actually, put forward some amazing content. So that's one of the big elements is that we've gone out and invited people like yourselves to share their content, because you don't know what's out there unless somebody asks people and invites them to share their stories. And that's the whole point of the DIF.
It's a great initiative and there's lots of good material there. And Sally, I think you're going to share another great download today.
Yes, I am. So as a part of the DIF Daily Download series, for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, throughout the festival, we are releasing a special ebook every day. And the ebook that we're releasing today is really focused on supporting technology professionals with trying to, I suppose, uplift their own personal brands and make the most out of the social media platform LinkedIn. And Luke, I know you'll have some views on this as a career technologist. In many cases, technology professionals, they're actually quite shy and perhaps don't put themselves out there or market themselves as much as they could. And that's something we're very passionate about here at the Reboot Show is, helping to put people at the front of the technology conversation, which really aligns with what the DIF 2021 festival is all about, bringing people and ideas together. So in this ebook, we share the 8 top tips for optimizing your LinkedIn profile and using the platform to get the most out of it. Whether you're looking for your next job in tech, you're looking to try and generate leads in tech or customers, or find people to survey for your technology startup, there's a lot of great tips in there for you. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this ebook, Luke, because I know you're passionate about people.
Look, it's really important, I think, today that, people take the advantage of the tools available to them to promote their own experience and skills and capability. And, LinkedIn's a great tool for that. And anyone who's just beginning, or for those people who've been on LinkedIn for a while, but perhaps want to, make sure that their profile is optimized to the best it can be, this is a great download. I use this tool myself. It really contains some very good practical tips about what to do to increase your profile's presence and to ensure that you're getting your capabilities and skills and experience across in a marketplace. So, great download, Sally.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. And what's on tomorrow, Kelly? I know there's been a lot on and we've covered a lot in this segment, but what's on tomorrow?
Yeah, well, tomorrow we have the Regional Growth Summit, where it really is around online business and for particularly regional and rural businesses. And because we know there's been a lot of people who've shifted remotely now through the past 18 months. So the LinkedIn positioning, is so important. So that's a really good resource. I'll share that with the team tomorrow. And also we have the PSE oration around digital transformation of the tax office. We did really well as a country through our structured the actual technology behind being able to roll out JobKeeper. That was actually quite quick compared to some other countries, and it was quite innovative, and it was built on the fact that we had an agency that is actually at a global standard as far as its technology transformation. So that's a really good story. But you mentioned there around LinkedIn and professional reputation. And one of the challenges I know that people coming from overseas establishing themselves in Australia is really around reputation and reference checking. And so there's a really great startup called Reputationaire, and they've got a little 15-minute show that I will put the link in again today. And they've startup and they're really coming in and quite disrupting, because all those reviews you do on Airbnb and other places, they are actually building out. You've got a social profile that shows you are a responsible person, you have a background and all of those components that when you've moved country, getting a lease reference is a bit tricky. So yeah, it's a really nice little way of finding a problem, seeing a problem, and then coming up with a solution, but using publicly accessible data in a way that actually benefits the individual. So LinkedIn is part of that because it's effectively your online CV. And I know when I moved back to Australia 12 years ago, nobody knew who I was, and I'd come in to do this role in this area. So I had to put forward and say, well, this is who I am and what I do, and all of those things. So it's all nicely tying together. And actually, I've got to run because it's the Startup Victoria's pitch night, and it's open house pitch night tonight. So they said basically anything goes. So I have no idea what the companies that get startups from Victoria are going to be pitching tonight.
Yeah, that's a great
Sorry, Luke. I was just going to say, I was just trying to quickly find Reputation Air's URL, but I can't find it. So we'll grab it and post it in this post. But thank you very much, Kelly Hutchinson from Digital Innovation Futures, for joining us for segment 5 of the DIF Daily Download series powered by Big Mouth. Thank you, as always, to our resident technology panelist, Luke Stowe. And we'll see everyone again tomorrow, 5:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Bye.
Great. See you later. Bye.